Welcome to Mountains Made Low, where we help listeners to encounter the love of God and live well in the modern world. I'm Dennis Mueller.
Did you forget who you were for a second?
For a second. Yeah, I was getting ready just to kind of go into things. I think, wait, I think I'm skipping something. And that would be my name. Yes, I'm Dennis Mueller.
Dennis M. Mueller, and I am Christine G. Reagan. Happy 66th birthday to Dennis here. Is that not it? Is it not 66?
Oh, you're just so funny.
Oh, gosh.
You're
And what is? I
hilarious.
just want to hear the number out loud.
It's 55.
55. And I knew that. And nothing... I'm doing my hair this morning. I'm curling, doing all the primping that I need to do. And I think, gosh.
You fixed your hair
should
this morning?
You shut your mouth. It's humid out. It's rainy and
Is that
misty.
what it is?
But I'm doing everything I need to do. Thinking, gosh, should I say 66? Should I go like 87? Like what number would really get under his skin? Just a little bit.
It doesn't get under my
It
skin
doesn't.
at
That's
all,
the thing.
It was a good day.
Was cake
Had
involved?
some steaks on the grill. Like, I'm not a... No,
I know you're not a
not
sweet
cake.
person, but
I am a sweet person.
you're not a chocolate person.
I'm not a chocolate
So what about
person.
like a vanilla cake?
I actually had some peanut butter fudge that my wife made me because that was just so good.
Okay.
She had made it a couple weeks ago, and I said, this is what I want for my birthday. And
Oh, that
that's what
does
we
sound
had.
really
Yeah,
delicious.
that was really, really good. My colleagues at work earlier in the week and everything, they sang happy birthday to me, and one of them said, "You look pretty good for 72." And
Who is this person? We should be friends. And they went higher. I went 66. I should have gone higher.
I know. So, like German and me, we don't forget anything. We just remember, we bide our times.
Right.
So now that all that's aside, let's talk about what today's episode is going to be on. We are really going to take a look at the importance of friendships and the role that friendship can have in helping us to grow in virtue and holiness. So we're going to explore why authentic friendships are not just nice additions to the Christian life, but absolutely essential for discipleship. And this is really, I don't think this is something that's on anybody's radar. I do think it is something that we need to talk about more often because we're living in a world that is facing a loneliness epidemic. And I think that helping us to reclaim friendships, especially friendships that help us to grow in our humanity, right? In Christian virtue and holiness, may be one of the most important spiritual practices of our time. And so if this podcast has been meaningful to you, please, again, like, subscribe, share it with someone who might be in need of a word of encouragement today. And if today's episode resonates with you and you think that somebody else might benefit it, please share.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Let's get into it.
So let's talk about the landscape of holiness. It's pretty bleak. Loneliness. Yeah, not holiness.
To be honest, the landscape of holiness might not be what it should be. A bit more sparse than we would like. But I think we should begin with the world that we're living in. It's well established that loneliness increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, depression, anxiety, dementia, even early death. And so why does this matter? So according to the CDC, 1 in 3 adults in the U.S. report feeling lonely, and 1 in 4 say that they lack social and emotional support, which is why the U.S. Surgeon General declared loneliness to be that public health epidemic back in 2023. Noting that chronic social disconnection affects survival just as much as smoking would if you were to smoke something like 15 cigarettes per day.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
And I can only assume that the pandemic exacerbated this problem, that a lot of these things really came into view after people really were alone in a way that they maybe hadn't been before.
Right.
In 2020, 2021.
I think if anything, it caused people to maybe take a look at it because they saw maybe some of the immediate effects that maybe weren't as evident prior to the pandemic. But now that there was this social isolation that was really inflicted upon the world, I think people began to kind of tune in and pay attention a little bit more and realize, oh, this isn't just a pandemic thing. There's something going on.
There's like a
here.
social epidemic
it's
component
a social
to it.
thing.
And I think
going
about that number 1 in 4. I mean, think about just being at the grocery store. And if 1 in 4 people are suffering with this kind of isolation, I mean, what do I do when I go into the shop right? I blow in and I blow out. There's so many people there. And if one in 4 of those people, they're suffering in ways that maybe they don't fully understand the ramifications of it, but what do I do? I'm not even noticing the needs of others. And I think about what people are like when they get into one space. 1, 2, 3, 4, you're struggling. 1, 2, 3, 4, you're struggling. Yeah. And what am I doing to address that need? I'm not saying that we have to save everybody in the shop rate. That's not what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's a lot bigger than
It has a
what.
face when we
Yeah,
look at people in the shop rate.
and
That's what I'm
and
saying.
it's bigger than I think we realize.
Yeah. So then the World Health Organization reports that nearly 1 in 6 people globally feel lonely. And between 2014 and 2019, loneliness was associated with 871,000 deaths annually. That's 100 deaths per hour
Just for loneliness.
just for loneliness.
Right.
I mean, isolation is unhealthy. One more statistic. Harvard's Loneliness in America study found that 21% of adults report serious loneliness, with the highest rates among adults age 30 to 44. And loneliness is hitting young people even harder. People age 15 to 24 have experienced a 70% drop in time spent with friends over the last 2 decades. That is the steepest decline of any age group.
Yeah.
And what's alarming to me is that 30 to 44 is not considered by the study to be young. And that's really what I took. Like, but think about that. So, I mean, maybe it's not you, maybe it's your children, maybe it's your grandchildren that fit into one of those statistics. And now you know a little bit more what they're battling with in
Yeah.
the culture and in their personal lives and their spiritual lives.
I think that's one of the reasons why people are getting married so later. I mean, there's a lot of contributing factors to that. But I think one of the reasons is people are just having a hard time finding connections and places where to connect because of this isolation that has kind of woven into their patterns of daily life. And what's really
And what technology too must do to that as well,
Yeah.
especially for that 15 to 24 age group. I don't mean to put people in such a stereotypical box. I know that there are good young people. I interact with them. They can hold a conversation. They can have deep, meaningful
Right.
discussions, and they know the meaning of life. I'm not saying that they're totally ignorant of this stuff.
Right.
But I do think that their interaction with social media and the way that they have grown up with it, they've kind of grown up with the addiction, whereas people in my generation grew into an addiction, which is very different.
Yeah.
Do they know how to relate socially in the same way?
Yeah.
I wonder what effect.
And to this whole technology issue, something new has kind of emerged into this vacuum,
Terrifying.
which is really, yeah, it's unsettling for me. But it's this whole idea. Everybody's talking about it, AI companionship, and it's really affecting the younger generation because we see millions of young people turning to AI chatbots for emotional support, for as a substitute for friendship, and even pseudo romantic relationships. And if you're sitting there thinking like, what?
Like, who's actually doing this? Is that really happening? It's really happening.
It's really happening. I mean, apps like Replica and Character.ai have exploded in popularity, and AI has some good things to it. I mean, AI can certainly be used to help and to assess and to do all these things, but when it comes to relationships, it's no substitute. And surveys show that nearly 1 in 4 teens and 1 in 3 young adults have used AI for emotional support.
I just can't even fathom being in such a dark place and not even maybe know you're in a dark place and seeking out pseudo relationship in this way.
Yeah.
It's just something I can't even. But what would drive people to do that? Isolation,
Yeah.
loneliness, feeling distressed. I mean, and just longing for companionship in such a way that you're going to take it however, you're going to seek it out however you can, whether it's real or not. Maybe it doesn't even matter if it's satisfying something in you temporarily.
And when teens are asked to kind of describe their relationship with AI, these are some of the things that they're saying. They're saying that AI is the only one who listens. AI is my best friend and the person who knows me best. If this is artificial, this artificial construct is what knows this person best as being considered their best friend and is the only person who listens to them, you can kind of see where there's that alarm bells should be triggered. And psychologists have begun to note that AI companions offer that instant availability, predictable emotional responses, and certainly there's no risk of rejection and no social anxiety associated with that. But for a generation already struggling with anxiety and disconnection, AI can feel like a real relational shortcut.
And I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't want to necessarily talk about this back and forth, but I wonder what the decline in religious affiliation, especially among young people, has to do with the decline in real friendships and relationships. I know that there's a connection there.
Yeah.
They won't religiously affiliate, and they're not connecting to people the way that they should. And I do think that one teaches you, if you understand that you're in a relationship to God, then you understand the importance of real relationship too, to other actual human beings. And if we're missing out on one, there's something that we're not understanding about the other.
And that really kind of ties into what we're going to be talking about, because the honest truth is that AI can't replace human relationships. It can soothe loneliness
In the short term.
in the short term, absolutely, but it cannot heal loneliness. It cannot offer mutuality, vulnerability, sacrifice, forgiveness, or even this embodied presence that real relationships require. And I think you might be right. I think there might be some type of connection. I don't, to my knowledge, it has never been studied about disaffiliation from religious organizations and practice with this technology and this epidemic of loneliness, because we're hardwired to be in relationships. We're communal beings. And so if we're not in real communal relationships, real friendships, real relationships, then organized religion is not going to be on our radar. It's not going to appeal to us.
And we're also not gonna know how to participate in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're disenfranchising our own selves.
So why does all of this matter spiritually? Well, from a Catholic perspective, all of this makes perfect sense to us.
To us, right?
Yeah, I mean, Catholic teaching has always insisted that love is incarnational. Real love takes a concrete, embodied expression, right? I think about what we said last week, where we categorize people as created words, the word of God. And that's what we need in our lives. We're a created word, and we need to relate to other created words. That's that incarnational connection. We need love and relationship to be visible, tangible, and present in the world. That's frankly why I think we've even been put into the world, for this kind of experience. So the Catechism reminds us of these things. Number one, this is paragraph 355. We are created for communion. We can talk about that in relationship to God and relationship to other people. Friendship is a great good that leads to spiritual communion. That's paragraph 2347. And finally, paragraph 1879 says that human beings are not meant to be isolated. Friendship is the most basic foundation of love. I mean, even think about a marriage. What marriage is going to have a high quality, is going to stand the test of time, if it's not built on friendship first? What's the problem with AI then in light of all this? Well, it just simulates all of these goods. It's simulating good. It's not really good in and of itself. It simulates conversation. It can even simulate like compassion. Frankly, is engineered probably to tell you what you want to hear, so that you keep seeking it out more and more. But it can't offer what Jesus offers us on the cross. It can't offer us sacrificial love. It can't give you a real gift of self. It doesn't think about you when it powers down. It doesn't offer you real forgiveness, and it doesn't actually share in your life. You can tell it all about your life. It's not really sharing. It's taking in information and it's regurgitating something out based on an algorithm. And so the church has to be extra vigilant in playing the far more important role that it has to play when it needs to offer this renewed commitment to forming real communities of friendship. It needs to be that real community of friendship in the world. Because loneliness is not just a mental health crisis, it's a spiritual crisis. It hits us on a soul related level. And it's a crisis of communion. We were made for communion, right? We get that from the Catechism. We're created for communion. And if we're just having these pseudo relationships, these faux friendships, then we're having a crisis of what we were made for.
Or not just, and again, we're just talking about AI, but even if we are in a state of loneliness, where maybe we're not using AI, but we're just not connected with people, we're in the same boat with all this stuff. When you talk about the psychological aspects and its relationship to friendship, there's no surprise that the psychological research shows that stable, healthy friendships are among the strongest predictors of well-being and longevity.
You know what? Sometimes I hear this communicated as intimate relationships, that this is a word that's often used in therapy, where people will ask you, how many intimate relationships do you have? And maybe it's not so much about the number of intimate relationships that you have, but you have to have intimate relationships, because then you're disclosing yourself to other people, right? In that spirit of intimacy. You're actually practicing showing other people who you are.
There was a systematic review of about 38 studies that were done, and what they found was that friendship quality, the number of friends, and efforts to maintain friendships all predict higher well-being.
I'm not saying I can't really disagree with it necessarily because the evidence is there, but number of friendships, I don't know. I might want to look into that a little bit more. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm
Right.
wondering how much the number matters.
Well-
I'm always going quality over quantity.
Right, and those studies did acknowledge that there was the quality of that, but there was an effect. Apparently there was some type of a statistical evidence that the number of friendship could also play into that. This is just a summary, but maybe the quality of some of them didn't need to be as intense if the number of friendships that you had were, because you have that connection. So you have all these connections, and maybe that's dampening the effect of loneliness, because this is what they're looking at.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
So it's not getting into what we're going to get into about how friendships are essential for the growth of the human person in terms of virtue and holiness. But in terms of research, the friendship quality, the number of friends, and the efforts to maintain friendships is what really was the predictor for a higher well-being. Because friendships provide that emotional support, that sense of belonging, stress reduction, improved self-esteem, and they also protect against anxiety and depression.
Yeah. That I can certainly say. Absolutely.
And so that's what they were looking at across these 38 studies. And, when you take a look at something like WebMD, I mean, they provide a very simple summary where they say that friends increase happiness, reduce stress, help us cope with trauma, and encourage healthier habits. So in other words, friendships literally change the brain, the body, and the trajectory of our lives. And the church has been saying this all along.
You know what we haven't done? Define friendship. If you had to define friendship, what would you say?
I would say it would be again, because there's different types of friendships, I mean, some
Right.
friendships can be on the level of an acquaintance. Some friendships might just be, maybe even...
We happen to do similar things
Right,
together.
right,
Sure.
right.
We're
Common
sharing
interest.
in life, but maybe not intimate exchange.
Right. But I would say that those lasting, true friendships are really rooted in an intimate relationship between two individuals that are both intellectual, spiritual, even physical sometimes.
Personal, physical,
personal,
yeah. I would agree. Well, I think about the words that the Greeks broke down, that philia love, right?
Yeah.
It's that a real friendship, because there's all sorts of ways in which we experience love, but they associated that philia word with that love between friends.
Right.
They suggested that it's harder to come by than we might think. It's an art form. If you have a real friend, there's something about, I often think about it like a skating partner, where that there's an intimacy there. They know who you are. They know your movements. They can anticipate things. I mean, that's a very, very high form of love. I also think it really should be the standard for friendship in some way. I know what you're saying, where there's all sorts of ways in which we relate to other people.
Right.
But would we really call all those people friends? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I get that. But
It'd
I'm
be great if we worked this stuff out ahead of time before we started to push record. But I think this is interesting to think about. People all have different things. I am very different than my father, who I talk about a lot. But he has gotten through most of his life with having two really good friends, and that's it. And to be honest, he's as happy as a clam. He doesn't want more.
Right.
He knows a lot of people. He does a lot of things, but he is entirely satisfied within himself with his two friends. I am not as much that way. And so I think people have different needs based on the fact that they're simply just different people. But when you're looking for a relationship with other people, you need to define for yourself who and what a friend is for you and to you.
Yeah.
And what you plan to not just get from them, but give to them.
Yeah.
Before we move on to other themes, friends are a necessary good. right?
Yes, I
Just
would
in the
agree.
spiritual life. Friends are an absolute necessary good. They correspond to us spiritually, physically, psychologically. All right, so let's talk about the presence of friendship in Scripture. So one of my favorite passages from the Gospels, I think we would both agree about this, is in the Last Supper narrative of John's Gospel. So this is John 15, where Jesus says, "I have called you friends."
Yeah.
Once the God of the universe calls us friends, well, then we need to define friendship through the person of Jesus as well.
Yep.
Okay. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. So sit with that for a little bit. I mean, God calls us friends, revealing that he wants to be in relationship with us and that his love for us is so great that he'd even sacrifice everything for love of us. And then he did it. He talks the talk, he walks the walk. So this is so astonishing when we consider who God is and who we are in relationship to him. We are valuable friends worth dying for. I mean, that's an art form. What's going on the cross is a work of art. Is a
Yeah.
work of art for God. And it's one that we actually look at all the time.
Well, we say that all the time. We talk about how if you want to know just how much you mean to the Lord or your value to God, all you have to do is just look upon the cross.
And art should reflect beauty. What's more beautiful than the gift of self? So Sirach 6, we're going back in the Old Testament here, says, "A faithful friend is a sturdy shelter. A faithful friend is a treasure and a life-saving remedy." Oh, I love that.
Isn't that great?
That's beautiful. So here God's reminding us of the words of Sirach, that friendship isn't sentimental fluff. It matters, and it's characterized by a life-saving remedy. And it's of profound importance to our human existence, and it matters to us spiritually, emotionally, and physically. That is so all-encompassing,
Yeah.
right? In the way that you would hope a shelter would be in your life. You don't just want a shelter to cover part of you. You want it to have four walls and a roof. You want it to protect all of you. You want it to see to
You
the
don't want
good
a Boy
of all
Scout
of you.
lean-to. That's what you don't want.
What
You
is
know,
that? What is-
like the Boy Scouts? They would build this like little lean-to, it'd be out of wood, but there'd be gaping holes. You'd still be exposed to the element.
would.
It wasn't perfect, right?
Yeah, Christine, not a camper, so
Right.
no idea what you're talking about. But somebody does. And I also think about this in relation to John the disciple. I'd love to hear what you think about this. We're told in Scripture that there is one that stands out as this beloved disciple. So we don't just have this model of friendship in the person of Jesus, but we have this model of friendship between Jesus and one of the 12, specifically, right? This beloved. So there's something about friendship that should be beloved,
Yeah.
right? It should be one who we don't, and it's not meant to be romantic necessarily. It's meant to be friendly. It's meant to be that filial love, that there's one who Jesus calls his beloved, right? And that friend is the only one of the 12 that is present at the foot of the cross, right? So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, understanding John's gospel and how he writes, I mean, the beloved gospel is never named. We always say it's John. The church tradition has always said it was John. The church gives it the name. But John, when he wrote it, he left the identity of the beloved disciple vague and unnamed, because that's a literary technique where he's inviting you and I to step into that role. We are the beloved disciple.
Sure.
And so when Jesus is talking about how much he loved the beloved disciple and that closeness, that's me. Like, I need to step into that role, because again, this is the friendship, the relationship that God wants and desires for me and from me. And so that intimacy that exists between the beloved disciple and between Jesus is something that
I think about everything you just said about like embodied presence, that the beloved disciple, be it John or us as the reader, is present with Jesus in that time of need too, right? And in that time of redemption, you might say, when that work of redemption is going on, he's present to it.
right.
Love that.
From a spiritual viewpoint, when we going back to loneliness, I think it really contradicts our very identity, because we're made for communion with God and with one another. And so if we lack friendships, we don't just suffer emotionally, we're suffering spiritually, because we lose that connection that our souls are craving for.
Well, go back to the beginning. What does God say? Man was not meant to be alone.
And so we lose the mirrors that really reflect God's love back to us when we're not interacting with others. I mean, it's God who's revealing that we are his beloved when he puts that person in front of us who is ministering to us, who is loving us in that moment, that friend, that individual who's standing with us in our moment of need. And so we lose that mirror when we're isolated.
I would also say that we are we need the mirror, but we have to be the mirror for other people.
Absolutely.
Think about how mirrors really should
Right.
work.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes when we think about friendship, it's like, well, what am I getting out of this? We are called to friendship because we are called to be that mirror for other people as well.
Yeah. And this is why the church insists that community is not an optional thing. This whole idea of communion. It's the ordinary means by which God sanctifies us. And as disciples of Christ, we're called to the perfection of love. And love is always, always, always deeply relational. Holiness is never this solo project. It's not me just kind of working through things in order to kind of grow in virtue and I'm going to become holy by doing X, Y, and Z. The reality is I can't do that on my own. I need to be in a relationship with God. We talked about that in that episode on grace. It's God's grace that is going to lead me, inform me, and conform me to holiness. And so this doesn't happen in a vacuum. I have to be in a relationship with God in order to grow in holiness. And I have to be in a relationship with others in order to grow in virtue. And so holiness grows through this living relationship with God and others. And Pope John Paul II, he taught that the vocation of every lay person is holiness lived in communion. So again, we can't achieve holiness. We can't achieve a virtuous life living in a vacuum, right? It can only be achieved by living in communion with God and communion with others. And the perfection of charity expressed in real relationships. This is what it takes. So the church's vision is really clear when it comes to the importance of friendships. Friendships are not optional. It's the environment in which holiness grows. Yeah.
And that the human condition should thrive. And
yes.
be ordered to higher things.
Yeah.
Because you can't grow in charity without people to love and people to forgive and people to challenge and people to accompany. And you can't grow in virtues like patience and humility and honesty unless you learn and practice and live those virtues in real relationship. And I think about that too. We don't just practice the faith, we also practice friendship, right?
Yeah.
We get it right, we get it wrong, we start again, we seek forgiveness, we receive it. And friendship is when all of these things are happening and we practice it day in and day out, friendship becomes the workshop where God shapes our hearts.
Yeah.
And the truth is rooted in God's very identity. Who is God? God is a communion of persons. He is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He's a family of love. He's a play of relationships rooted and united in love. To be made in God's image means that we are made for relationships of love. And we're hardwired for communion.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time.
So remember how we mention over and over again how we have this infinite capacity for love that can only be fulfilled by the God who is love and then who teaches us to love through the other people he places in our lives, right? And I think about that too. I think about, do we look at other people who come into our lives or who have been in our lives for a while, and do we realize that God has perhaps instrumentally placed them there for a purpose, right? I think we just think, oh, by coincidence, I stumbled upon this or I stumbled upon that. Whereas God's like, I'm giving you these people, I'm giving you these gifts, and maybe so many of them go ignored.
And that also goes for
I feel
those.
ignored, Dennis. That's
well,
what I know.
Well, I mean, it even goes for those people who might be sitting across from you who are annoying and just bothersome. God might
Once
be
again, Dennis, I feel ignored.
Well, God might be putting those individuals in your life in order for you to grow in virtue, right? To grow in patience and to grow in understanding, to grow in wisdom about yourself and how you relate to people, and maybe even to learn humility and all of these other things. Like we don't know, but every relationship is an opportunity for us to kind of grow. And so if we're isolated and we're lonely, how's that going to happen? And sometimes I realize that loneliness sometimes is not by choice. I mean, I think about some of the people who are isolated not by choice, but just because of their circumstances.
In general, friendship is where we learn to be patient, to forgive, and to sacrifice. If you look at your friendships and those things aren't happening, then maybe you're not really friends. Or maybe you look at these relationships and you think, we need to start living these things differently.
Yeah.
Because we're not living friendship as we have been called. There's so many geese outside. Did you notice today?
Yeah.
I got out of my car and I was like, hi, fellas. Like, I just said it out loud. Like I was in need of friends or something. I don't know. Friendship is where we learn to be patient, to forgive, and to sacrifice, and to speak to people the truth, and to speak to people in love. And I think that it calls us to take inventory of our relationships and our friendships.
Not every single relationship we have to have needs to be a friendship, right?
Oh, no.
There's all different types of relationships that we're going to fall into, but the important thing is that we have someone in our life that we can kind of connect with, and that we can have a meaningful relationship with.
Because all of these things, when we're talking about truth telling and love and honesty and patience and forgiveness, these are the building blocks of holiness. And that's why we say that friendship should be a path to holiness. And Christ is our ultimate friend. I think we need to remember that too, especially in times of isolation.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I have no friends, or I'm lacking intimate relationships. Through the sacraments, you can experience the most intimate relationship possible. And I don't think we want to undervalue that.
Yeah.
We don't want to underestimate the role that Christ plays in our life. And to be honest, I think that's why maybe somebody like my father or some other people who I think are a bit more spiritually evolved than other people, to be honest, to pay him a tremendous compliment, it's maybe because they're being fed in other ways, that they don't look for other things. And I don't mean to imply that if you need multiple intimate relationships in your life that you lack holiness. I don't mean that.
Right.
I mean that sometimes the sacraments are satisfying something in you so infinitely that you realize that you don't need much more than that.
Yeah, well, take a look at some of the lives of the saints.
That's what I'm talking
right?
about.
So, I mean, some of those saints were very isolated. Like, think about some of the hermits and whatnot. But even those more well-known saints who they didn't have a lot of connections outside of the monastery or outside of the cloister, but they had this great intimate communion. I think.
Well, I think about people who were like the early Christians who did not even practice their faith out in public. What are they doing? They're doing it underground. They're doing it in homes. They're doing it in very, very small communities. Right. And so where are your true friendships? They're kind of underground, and you need to experience them underground. You're not doing that in large groups of people. That's not like, I don't know, what's that big stadium in somewhere in England, like Wembley Stadium, where they have big concerts. That's not happening.
Yeah.
So
friendship, we have to remind ourselves, is not about this spiritual achievement. It's about learning to love. And love is learned in real relationships. When we get into friendship, friendship is really where God teaches us patience. He teaches us mercy, honesty, humility, generosity, all these virtuous things, right? It's where we discover our dignity and help others to discover theirs. And again, that can only happen in the context of a relationship. So it's where we practice the kind of love that actually makes us saints, right? And when we're using that language of saints, we're talking about holiness, growing in holiness.
This is where I think some insight from Aristotle is really, really helpful. So he wrote a lot about friendship, and he talked about 3 different kinds of friendships that we can have. And so I'm going to read this to you. This is from some, I don't know, philosophical website. I should probably get it. But the first friendship that we can experience is the friendship of utility. These friendships are based on what someone can do for you and what you can do for another person. So there is some reciprocal relationship going on there. Mm-hmm. It might be that they put in a good word for somebody. They might buy you a gift in return. Such relationships have little to do with character, though, and can end as soon as possible. Somebody is no longer useful to us or removed from the equation. Okay, so that's a friendship of utility. Then we have the friendship of pleasure. These are friendships based on enjoyment of shared activity or the pursuit of fleeting pleasures and emotions, because pleasure and emotion is always fleeting.
Right.
These are not the ties that bind, folks.
Yeah.
This might be someone you go to drinks with or join in a particular hobby with, and is a common level of association among the young in particular. This type of relationship can again end quickly, dependent as it is on people's ever-changing likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
So I think he's pointing out, and we're building to what I think is the highest form of friendship, what that philia form of love is really getting at.
Yeah.
Good.
I just think to kind of put some things in context, for people, like when you talk about this friendships of, what was the first one? Friendships of
Utility.
utility. So I think a lot of times that might be more a common place for that to occur would be in work
Yeah.
relationships. You have close relationships at work, but they're kind of rooted really in that work relationship. They help me out, I help them out. I can use them for this project. I'll jump in and help with that project. And there's real gratitude there. We have to be careful because sometimes it could become very utilitarian.
Well,
Where
that's
like
what it is.
I'm gonna begin to use you for my own benefit.
Or you
And
feel like you're being used,
yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
hard to appreciate the time that's spent together. But think about how much time you spend at work. I
yeah,
spend a lot of time at work. And so what relationships and friendships, if you will, are we interacting with maybe the most?
yeah.
Maybe those utilitarian friendships. So I mean,
How
I wish
utilitarian am I to you?
very. Very. I was going to say, once we went through all of these things, I was going to be like, so where do we fit in, Dennis? What kind of friends are we?
Right.
I'm still trying to figure it out
Right.
almost 10 years later. But yeah, I mean, are you just of a use to me? And it can create a culture of use, which is why really I have a hard time even categorizing it as a friendship. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe relationships of utility.
And when we talk about the friendships of pleasure, even with the Star Wars group that I belong to and everything, I mean, there's great joy in that. I love getting together with all of those individuals, but I'm not like going over their houses to celebrate birthdays, and
Yeah.
we're not like going out to the movies, on Friday night and texting and calling them, checking up to see how they're doing. It's really just it's almost like a social, fraternal type thing. You just kind of get together and you do stuff and you have a good time, and then you go back to your life afterwards. So there's those type of relationships too. But the highest form is
The friendship of virtue. And this is what I really think we've been trying to talk about all along with a holy friendship, because virtue makes you holy. And therefore, the people who are most important in your life are maybe those people who are drawing you to virtue and the higher things. In one way or another, you're trying to get to heaven together, and maybe you wouldn't articulate it that way. Aristotle says, these are the people you like for themselves, who typically influence you positively and push you to be a better person. This kind of relationship, based as it is on the character of two self-sufficient equals, is a lot more stable than the two previous categories. This is real friendship.
Yeah.
And I think this is when people say, if you have two really good friends in your life, or some people I've heard say, if you have one really good friend in your life, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Because that is who a friend should be.
because they can be real. They're going to be honest with you. I mean, when you're being a jerk, they're going to tell you, yeah, you're being a jerk.
Or if you're doing something that's even physically or spiritually speaking, if somebody is watching you slowly just incur like a slow death in
Right.
many ways, they're not really your friend. And if you're watching other people do that, you're not really their friend. Friendships should give glory to God. And how many people
And
in
how
your
does that
life,
happen? Talk about how that happens.
well, you have to know God. You have to know God individually, and you have to be able to bring that together in the relationship that you're sharing. By your presence together, what does Jesus say in the gospel? He says, when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in their midst. When you are with these people who you call friends, is Jesus present in that relationship, and how you act, how you speak, how you love each other, and how you love one another as a unit or individually. Because I carry, whether I'm with friends or not, in the same way that I feel like I try to carry Sean with me, whether he's with me or not.
Yeah.
I try to carry those friendships with me, where if something that a friend says, a real friend says, comes to mind, I try to communicate that to other people. And in that way, that friend is with me, even though they're not. The wisdom that they shared with me, the love that they have shared with me is present, and I'm trying to give that as a gift to another person.
I think when you're talking about it in that type of a context, if we just kind of maybe use marriage and maybe being parents as an analogy, the church understands those relationships, the parental relationship and the married relationship. The purpose of that is to help the person that you love in that relationship to grow in virtue and to grow in holiness. That's the outcome. That's what we're working towards. That's the purpose of that relationship. And so I think when we talk about these close interpersonal relationships that we have with our friends, we have to ask ourselves, do we have a relationship with our friends where we're trying to achieve the same thing? Where we love them enough that we're trying to love them into eternity, with God and heaven. There's relationships in my life that might be of the first two categories, and that's not on my horizon. And there might be some relationships that are in my life that kind of, I feel, meet that third category, the virtuous. But I have to be honest and sit back and think to myself, am I really doing what needs to be done in that relationship to help that person to grow in holiness, become and get to heaven? And I can tell you right now, like just thinking about some of those relationships, like, no, I got work to do. I really need to kind of step up my game there, with those type of things.
Because only when we're doing those things does that friendship become a sacred space and a sacred place. And that's what I think the glory of God comes into play. Is your friendship, look at the people that you know, is your friendship sacred? Is God's will being made known in that relationship between the two of you or between the group? This is why I think, especially for young people, Catholic young adult groups are really important. I know how important it was in my life. And I know with many of those relationships, how they've evolved over time and how valuable they've become in married life and parenthood and all of that. But God's will is, it reigns and it's made known in the world when real friendships are sacred, because then the world is being made sacred. Then the world is being made holy, all because people are really being friend to one another. You can't have Christ at the center of a friendship if Christ is not at the center of your life. It's not just going to spontaneously happen in the center of any relationship, marriage included, by the way. If you're like, wow, I really love how these holy friendships sound, I really love how these virtuous friendships sound, that comes from the person of Jesus. And so the person of Jesus has to be the very root of your life, and then it can become the root of your friendship. There are a lot of people who I know their favorite color, I know their favorite movie, I know their favorite this, that, and the other thing. But they don't necessarily, when we're together, we don't speak the language of the kingdom. And then there are other people who I know maybe not as well in those other ways. I don't know people's favorite color all the time, but I feel very connected to them in friendship because of the kingdom speak that we just naturally have back and forth. And I would argue that that is a very valuable friendship, even if it's like, oh, well, what's their favorite movie? I don't actually know, but I know their faith and I know their heart. And that's way more important when we're talking about heavenly things and where we're going.
I think the challenge, well, because I'm listening to you, but I'm finding, like, for myself, that the challenge to all of this, when you're framing it in terms of Aristotle and this virtue of friendship, how do I get to a point where Christ becomes the center of my life? Right? Because I know I personally struggle with that, and I'm sure many listeners like, well, I don't know, like how do I even know that he's the center of my life? And so if this is what everything's kind of hinging on, I think we need to. I don't know. I mean, this is definitely going to have to be
Next
separate.
week's episode.
It's going to have to be a definite separate episode on how to get to a point in your relationship with Christ Jesus where he is the center of your life.
And therefore, he is who you're bringing to other people as we encounter them. But you can't encounter other people in Christ if you have not encountered Christ yourself. When two people are encountering Christ, I heard a great keynote, or maybe it was a breakout session at a conference a couple years ago. And the speaker talked about how a real friend is one who, like Mary and Elizabeth, run to each other in the good news that they have received, in the gifts of their children and everything like that. They've been given heavenly gifts, and then they run to each other to share the gift with each other. What would make us run to other people in that real, holy, divine friendship, the way that Mary and Elizabeth ran to each other? That's a real friend. We're always going to have utilitarian friendships. We're always going to have people who we like to be with, necessarily because it's fun. They're fun people. Yeah. But if we're not becoming people after God's own heart, then God's heart is not going to be in the presence of our friendships. As I get older, I want to run to people in that way more than maybe I did. Well, I still can. You're not kidding, right? I have a hot pack in my bag right now. The back is not what it used to be, and maybe we're getting too off base. Although, frankly, this is what I think we've been building to. So pray for those friendships who are going to help us chase after God's own heart together.
No, I hear what you're saying, but I just think that, like, there has to be a follow-up to this. For
I look
sure.
forward to how you're going to do that.
Well, that's what I'm listening to you, and in the back of my mind, I'm kind of trying to run through this. Like, all right, how do we do this? take like, okay, well, now that we've kind of laid all this stuff out, the importance of friendships and how we need these things and how certainly it combats the epidemic of loneliness. And with regards to friendships, the purpose is to help us to grow in virtue and holiness. And bringing in Aristotle, I'm sitting there thinking to myself now, like, well, how do I model my friendships and my relationships after Christ Jesus, and how do I put him into the center of my life? That's like, oh my gosh, that's a complicated a complicated question.
And that's why we have a podcast.
Right.
That's ongoing.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about this.
All right, so
We'll see what happens next week. Who
like,
knows?
my mind is racing right now because of kind of how you presented all this stuff.
How I co-opted the podcast midway through.
Yeah. So like my wheels are turning. I'm going to have to pray on this to kind of think about how best to kind of what needs to be done next. For our listeners. For those people who may be listening, who may be struggling with a little bit of loneliness, it might be with that 1 in 4, persons, 1 in 3 persons who are struggling with loneliness. I think I just want to kind of just throw out some things that maybe that they can do to help to establish connections. And for those of you who are listening who may be like, well, like I'm not in that boat. I'm okay. I'm not dealing with loneliness. What you can do to maybe help to connect with somebody who may be lonely. I think that's an important kind of takeaway. And so just to maybe highlight some practical things that we could do, like without doing like maybe a deep dive, I think would be helpful. And so one of the things I think we need to take a look at is really to make presence a priority. To be present to people. And that face-to-face time really matters more than this digital connection. Even those brief interactions that we have, like a 5-minute chat after Mass, like a quick check-in at work, can really help to improve well-being, our well-being and the well-being of the others. And you can text your kids and your spouse and tell them that you love them, but when was the last time you hugged each other? Right. I just think about that myself sometimes, like my kids, we always like a hug. We'll just like, kiss hello. And, we always ask people, check in and everything. But, like when was the last time like I grabbed one of my kids and hugged them? That intimacy that we just need, Sometimes it's great to hear that I love you and to read that in a text. But the physical part of that, I think, is important. So there's some things that we need to do in terms of prioritizing presence that I think would be good. Just think about like the neighbors that you see outside. It's great, wave, hi, but take the 5 minutes to walk over and just ask them how they're doing. Like, it's great to see you. What's going on? How you been? What's going? And just have that conversation. That might be the only conversation that person had during the day, right? And it's going to be you. And again, you get to be the mirror of God to that particular individual. I think we also need to really initiate things. We really need to take the initiative. I think a lot of times we sit back and we wait for somebody to kind of come to us. But we don't want to wait for others. Those who are suffering from loneliness often struggle with motivation, so they're less likely to take the initiative to engage others. So we don't want to wait for them, and we don't want to assume because they're not making an effort that they're not interested. I think that's something we always we think about. We see this person, well, they kind of seem distant and everything, so I'm not going to engage. Wow. Man, well, they might not be engaging because maybe they're depressed, they're lonely, they don't know how, they have anxiety. Little simple things, when you think about that homebound person or that person who might be a little isolated, that widowed individual, invite them over for dinner. Pop over for a cup of tea, to go over and sit down and pray the rosary with them. Like this is going to be stuff that they're going to really begin to look forward to. They're going to be looking forward to that type of a connection with you. You're making dinner anyway, so what is it to invite your neighbor and say, hey, listen, why don't you come over for Sunday dinner?
What is it to invite Christine?
Right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well,
I'll eat that peanut butter fudge.
And then I think the other thing that we need to do too is like maybe practice a little vulnerability. Don't be afraid to let yourself be known, because as you've said, those true lasting friendships are rooted in knowledge of one another. So don't be afraid to be real with somebody who you trust naturally, that you have a relationship. Let them know when you're feeling overwhelmed. Ask them to pray for you, or better yet, ask them to pray with you, right? With different things. So there's a lot of things that we can do, just engaging in Christian service, joining small groups, forming small communities, all these things. There's a lot of things that we can do to begin to make connections, build connections, establish connections, and maybe combat any loneliness that we're feeling, but also maybe pull people in who we know might be dealing with loneliness themselves.
Yeah. And maybe, I mean, think about those friendships of utility and friendships of pleasure.
Yeah.
And maybe God is calling you to have those friendships and relationships evolve. I mean, isn't that evangelization? Right?
Yeah,
Maybe you need to
it
be
is.
sharing Christ's word and love with them so that that friendship can evolve to higher things. You know, praying with people. Gosh, would that change? That would certainly change your utilitarian friendships. And maybe you might get fired for it. I don't know. There's some workplaces where it's like, don't be praying with people in the
Right.
hallway. That's going to go right to HR. But maybe prayer needs to be included, not just, it maybe even more so with those friendships that are rooted in virtue. Are you
Well,
praying with them?
Think about
too?
think about some of the friendships that you might have, some of the connections that you do have. Would you be willing to turn around and connect with that person and say, listen, what do you say on Saturday mornings we get together for a cup of coffee and we do our own little Bible study?
Yeah.
Or we just get together and we pray the rosary. Would we be willing to do something like that?
Yeah. To close, if you look at the story of salvation and we put it in the context of friendship, Jesus died for his friends. Friendship changed the world. That's what Jesus did for us. He is our friend. Jesus changed the world through friendship. And if we're really called to share in the mission of Jesus, we are called to change the world as well. Continuing his mission, that should be what friendship
Oh, friendships
is.
have certainly changed my life. So it doesn't take much to kind of connect with someone, and it's really more likely than not that you'll find someone who's been waiting for that connection. And so friendship, we just want to, as we conclude today, we just want to remind you that friendship is not a luxury. It's really the path to holiness. It's medicine for the soul and a reflection of God's own divine life. And in a world where I think loneliness is taking lives, Christian friendship becomes this prophetic witness that declares you are not alone, you are loved, you belong. And as Jesus tells us, as we've mentioned over and over again in this podcast, I have called you friends. He wants to be in communion, he wants to be in relationship with us. So may we become the kind of friends who make God's love visible, friends who help one another to climb the mountains of life, and friends who, through grace, help to make those mountains made low. See what I did there?
I did see what you did there.
It's kind of...
Good job. Good job, friend. And we'll see you next week.
All right, God bless.
We should say friends. We'll see you next week.
Friends, we'll see you next week. All right, God bless.